Welcome to Lead Like You Mean It, people. Let me say it again. Lead Like You Mean It, people. It's the live series where we have bold, honest conversations with real leaders who bring confidence, care, and clarity to the way they lead. I'm your host, Carla Coates, and today we will dive deep into the heart of authentic leadership. Our guest, Mr. Gary Hibbs, a DMVer.
DMV, that's right.
Yeah, is a transformative leader, speaker, and executive coach with over 30 years of experience in senior living, leadership development, and organizational growth. As the CEO and founder of Unleashed to Lead, Gary is a certified Maxwell leadership coach, speaker, and trainer who brings real world insight from decades in executive leadership. And he served as the regional executive director for Erickson Senior Living and overseeing multi-state operations, and now teaches emerging leaders. And you know what? I didn't know you were a professor at UMBC.
UMBC, that's right. Yeah, the
I had
Erickson
no
School of
idea.
Aging.
Cool,
Yeah,
cool,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Okay, so today we'll unpack what authentic leadership really looks like and why it matters more than ever. And we're going to talk about leading with great clarity, confidence, and courage. Hey, so grab your coffee. We're going to talk to Mr. Gary Hibbs. How you doing, Gary?
Doing great, Carla. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate talking about this. And I love, what you're talking about, lead like you mean it. Well, live like you mean it too.
Yeah.
But lead like you mean it. That's great. The intentionality in that title. I love it.
Oh, sure thing. Okay, Gary, this is my first question for you.
Fire
Ready?
away.
All right. All right. You spent decades in executive leadership before launching your coaching practice. What was the turning point that made you realize it was time to lead differently? And what does authentic leadership mean to you today?
Yeah, thanks. I think it means being real and living a life of integrity. I had a lot of success leading and really focusing on bringing people along. But the problem was I wasn't bringing myself along. I wasn't living in integrity, really. I was more concerned with my reputation, what people thought of me. And a reputation is who people think you are, not necessarily who you are. Character and reputation don't always come along together. And there was so much that was in my mind in terms of, just being real that wasn't integrating with the outside of what I was presenting. I had a great family, great career, great all of that from the outside looked pretty good, like I was really succeeding. But there was so much that was inside my head that I was worried that if you really knew who I was, and I think human beings in masses live this way. If you really knew who I was and what I was struggling with, you may not like me or you may not love me. And I couldn't take the risk of opening myself up totally. And it's a scary place to be. Thoreau said, in Walden, he wrote that the mass of men, and he could have said people, but this was, written a while back. But he said the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation.
Wow.
And I think that's true. We live in hiding, and that's where I was. Even though I had success on the outside, I was increasingly struggling. When you're not living a life of integrity, you're living a life of disintegrity.
Yes.
Which means that you're about to disintegrate, just like a building that has cracks in it. Eventually, if you don't address it, that building is going to collapse. And that's what happened to me. I tried to medicate it with every now and then alcohol. And that didn't work. In fact, that expedited the crash.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So one thing when you mentioned about just the fact of the integrity and being yourself, I remember that I didn't start to really enjoy leadership until I started being just me.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that because I was so used to, this is the way you should do it. Follow what everyone else is doing. And I really didn't like myself. I hear what you're saying. I didn't like myself, and I didn't figure other people cared for me either. But
Yeah,
it's when I started to say, I'm just going to be Carla, whether they like me or not. But it
that's
took
right.
years to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Years.
Yeah, and that fear that I was talking about, whether you're thinking, well, they may not like Carla, or I was thinking they may not like Gary. That you have to have this perfect persona. You strive for perfectionism. That's not real, and people are looking for authenticity and real. In leaders, that's what we're looking for, is real. Don't spin me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Don't spin me. And I was so afraid that if people saw the cracks in my life, that they would reject me. But when a leader stands up and does something, now hold on to your seat, apologizes, or says, you know what, I was wrong.
Oh my gosh.
Whoa. And as leaders, it's easy to succumb to this notion that you're never wrong. People don't want to see that you have a crack in your armor. No, people want to see that. And here's the funny thing: as a leader, I remember talking to a CEO once who said, "I can't let people know that they want to follow somebody who's strong." And I said, "Look, the reality is." We had this conversation. I said, not only do they see your flaws, they that you're trying to hide, they already know it. And if you don't admit it, then they respect you even less.
Yes.
So admit your stuff. Now, you can't be a bumbling idiot as a leader. I mean, you can't be incompetent, but you have to be authentic, and you have to be vulnerable. I love the work of Brene Brown.
Oh, yes,
The Gift of Imperfection. I first saw that book when I was in rehab, and I said, what a gift. It freed me up to, as you said, Carla, I love what you just said, to be you, to be you, and if there are things that you need to change, expose it, and people who love you and that you can trust will come around you, and you want to be better, right? So just be your authentic self, and open yourself up, and you will improve. That's the only way. But if you're hiding, you can't improve.
It's that ego thing. One of my favorite books, I'm trying to think, some leadership. It's a little small book. But anyway, he starts off the book by saying that you need to leave your ego behind. And when you mentioned about a leader being vulnerable, I remember someone said to me, Carl, I'm going to leave the organization because the leader never gave me direction. And he would get upset with me when I would go my direction. But I would literally beg him, can you tell me which way I need to go? And she said he would never. So after she left, I brought this up to the leader. And he stood, and I'll never forget it. He stood in my doorway and he said, oh, well, really? And I could see him trying to protect himself. And he said, well, and his shoulders went down. And he said, well, maybe I could have given. And then his shoulders went back up. But yeah, she was the problem. And I thought, oh, you had the opportunity just to say.
You were close. You were close.
Yeah, because it should have hosted his body language.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And there's so much in this realm when you're free and yourself, and you don't have fear. I mean, if you're fearful as a leader and you're not living in integrity and you're not free, you inject that kind of a dynamic and that kind of a culture. If you're not freed up to be yourself, you can, even if you're not realizing it, you can create a culture of fear. Some of the worst leaders that I've seen are extremely bright, but extremely insecure.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. But, and again, you have to have competence. There's no doubt about that. But the way you get competent really is in your experience, and what is it that you do with failure? You learn from failure. Failure is our friend. It's not something to be hidden or avoided. In fact, people were talking about failure in terms of, you chase failure. There's a guy named Ryan Leake. If you haven't seen his work, Ryan Leake is awesome. He did the surprise wedding on YouTube and all that. But Ryan Leake is a number of times teamed up with John Maxwell, who you mentioned. I'm a coach, and he's written and talked about that. The only failure really is it's not in keeping away from failure. I mean, you don't try to fail on purpose, but you're freed up and know that you're going to learn some things through failure. The only real failure is not getting back up.
Yeah.
That's the only real failure. So when you're freed to pursue something, knowing that there's a high likelihood that you're gonna fail, that's okay. That's the grounds. That's the school. That's the school where we learn. And that's so much fun.
It's something that you mentioned about the culture. The culture of an organization should allow the employees to fail, not to fail with the mission, not to fail, let's say, with a particular project, but in their learning, they should have the opportunity to fail, because once they have that freedom to say, okay, I failed, I'm not going to get fired because I did something, slightly wrong. I'm in a learning position right now. I should have the opportunity to say, okay, you know what, Carla, you didn't do that well. Let me clearly tell you what you didn't do well, but it's not the end of the world.
Exactly.
Let me put you on the right path so that you can succeed based on my experience. And if I don't know, I'm going to find somebody for you who can help you, who can mentor you, who can coach you through this that you would be successful. That's what organizations should provide. This thing of failure, I'm going to protect myself. Now I'm going to fire someone because they did one thing and they're under me. I got to protect myself. That's right. That's wrong.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, and I want to be really careful. People say, you're not going to hold people accountable or any of that. No. Yeah. There's this ground of, what kind of culture are you creating? Because if you are afraid that the person with authority is going to come down on you when you make a mistake, you're going to keep your head down. You're going to just do what you need to do to keep your job. You're not going to be creative. You're not going to be innovative. And we want to build teams where people know they can take a chance, take a risk to build something creative and innovative. I mean, today's standard is yesterday's innovation. I mean, and tomorrow's standard is going to be today's innovation. That's the only way you get better individually and corporately. But, so I one of the things that I've really learned in my experience in organizations is, you have certain goals you want to get to, and what you're trying to do, what you're trying to attain in your goals is important. Make the goal. But how you get there is almost as important, if not more important, because how you bring a team along, and what you're talking about is allow for mistakes, and how you treat those mistakes is almost as important, and I would argue so often more important than the actual goal you're trying to reach, because you're creating culture. You're creating a place where people know that when they make a mistake, they don't brush it under the rug. They can raise their hand and say, you know what? I messed up.
Yep.
And that's the kind of team that I want. Now, if I go, you did what? Are you kidding me? What were you thinking? Well, you might as well forget it. You just killed culture as a leader.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot to be learned, through all of that. But what happened in my life, as an individual, and also I was trying to hide. I was not being authentic. And like you said, to who you were, and my life crashed.
Yeah. So talk to me about your insecurities.
Well, I think one of them is that if you really mentioned earlier, if you knew who I really was, would you love me? So the insecurity is simple and as profound as being found out, whether that's professionally or personally. I think the dynamic is the same. And, so you wear a mask, and then when you screw up, you tighten the mask.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid somebody finds out who I am, So I think it's that insecurity of being found out for who I really am. And to the extent you're able to let the light shine on that, if it's shame, if it's a mistake, if it's whatever, shame cannot live in the light. It cannot live in the light, And what I found out is when I finally got to the point, I had a moment of clarity. I was actually in jail. I had a DUI, and I was in jail, dressed in orange. I don't like orange. I was there, and I finally got to this moment of clarity. I said, God, I can't do this anymore. And the only thing I knew, and I grew up in the church, and I had heard about things like unconditional love and the God that would never leave you. But did I really, really believe that was true? I didn't really lean on that truth. But in that jail cell, I said, God, I can't do this anymore. But one thing I did believe in that moment is I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with my family. I don't know what's going to happen with my job and my career, but I believe this right now. And I did get what I call the gift of desperation, which actually God, the gift of desperation.
Wow.
Said, I believe you will never leave me. And as a Christian, I believe in the scriptures. Hebrews 13:5 says that you will never leave me, never leave me. And that's all I had. And, the beautiful thing, Carla, is I realized that that's all I needed.
Yes.
And that was where healing began. Healing began right there. And I felt a flood of peace. And I believe it's the Spirit of God that came over me in a very special way, not the spirits, not the alcohol. I had a peace with alcohol, but it didn't last. It didn't last. And that never lasts. That was a painkiller that was a pseudo painkiller.
Wow.
But this peace just took over. Now, I'm not saying everything has been, perfect since then. Heck no. I still wrestle with stuff, but the insecurity is being found out. But you have to keep working that. You have to keep being honest. You don't clean your house once and then it's clean.
Oh, that's excellent. I got to use that.
You have to keep working it because it gets dirty again. And in my humanness and all of that, I start to hide a little bit. And so I have people around me that I trust that are saying, let me challenge you on something. And you have to go after that. But I rose from that jail cell. And the cool thing is after my last drink, I was literally a year to the day through some circumstances, which I believe God brought together. I was standing on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro.
Wow.
Literally. And it was both metaphorically and literally, it meant a lot to do that. But you can get out of that valley and get to a mountaintop. But I know there are people that may be listening to me right now that are in that valley.
Yeah.
One of the things I hope you hear, at least through my life, is that there's always hope. But you got to get people around you that you can trust, that have gone down whatever road it's on, that you're on right now. I'm the most qualified to help the man I used to be. Yeah. And every one of us has a story.
Tell me about that. I'm sorry, Control. Tell me about that quote you mentioned before the program. When you stand before 100, at least 100.
Yeah, well, I was talking about, and I've heard the statistics. Or, if I'm speaking to a group of 100, there can be anywhere from 15 to 18 of the people in that group that are struggling with alcohol, just alcohol. That's amazing. And by the way, when you hear the word addiction, people think drugs and alcohol, and those are certainly addictions, but I think addictions come in all kinds of forms.
Absolutely.
It's something that's got a hold on us. It could be the addiction of food. It could be the addiction, gambling. It can be the addiction of approval. You fill in the blank. But anything that we we use to fill that hole in us. And in my faith, I believe that's a God-shaped hole.
Mm-hmm.
But that hole that you try to fill with other things other than what we were created to have it filled with, or who, better said, to fill with, we are going to look to other things: busyness, money, sex, whatever.
Yeah.
Never fills the hole. And in fact, only certainly there are certain ones that are very dangerous. Alcohol is one. I had a nephew that just couldn't shake the addiction of heroin addiction, and he said he'd get his hands on anything he could to fill the hole. And he died of a carfentanil overdose. And so I saw that close up. Thank God he came to peace with God before he left, but the talons of the drugs were just so deep in him. But I would just say to anybody who's not living a life of integrity, look for help. I mean, I'm speaking to the person who may be laying naked on the bathroom floor and they're bleeding and they don't know how they're bleeding or why they're bleeding or what happened. Just open yourself up. The admission of who I was.
Yeah.
I thought that would kill me. I thought if people knew who I was, that's going to kill me. In fact, the very thing that I thought was going to kill me, to be honest and authentic, was the very thing that started my healing.
So just to be clear, it was the addiction to alcohol that you were ashamed of, or was it something else?
Oh, it was that. Yeah. And alcohol can lead you to do things and be in places and all of that. But there's other things, that you're not being authentic, or people really knew who alcohol was my painkiller that led me to other inauthenticity, if you will, lack of authenticity. And that's what it does.
Yeah.
And I would say that any kind of addiction, again, it could be to approval or whatever, that you don't reach out and try to get help for, is going to eventually catch up with you. Some things kill you right away, like carfentanil. Alcohol is a slow burn, but there are other things like approval that can really kill your spirit and your joy, and you're just existing. I'm sure there's somebody that's listening to me right now. When I went to my first therapist, I went to a therapist when I finally started to ask for help. And he said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I want to live." I knew I wasn't living. And as Thoreau said, the mass of people, the mass of men are living lives of quiet desperation. If you're living a life of quiet desperation, you don't have to be taking heroin or anything like that, but you may just be living safe. Or you just may, be after comfort, and that is a slow death. Don't do that. Leave it all on the field. Live wholeheartedly, as Brene Brown talks about. Your whole heart. Bring your whole heart. I don't want to, at the end of my life, be on my deathbed and say, "Oh, I made it." I want to say, "Oh my goodness, what a ride that was." What a ride that was. I made it, and my 401k is in place. And, I don't want to do that. And I think I know that's how I was living. That also, made it worse for me. And I knew I wasn't alive. So, then that glass of Pinot Grigio became even more enticing.
Wow. Tell me what happened. Now, I got to tell you something funny. I have another question.
Yeah.
So I told you, during this show, this is our third one, I never get to all my questions. So we're just on question one, Gary.
That's great.
So during that situation, what happened to you? You're in jail. You call out to God. What happens to you as far as employment? What happens to you as far as relationship? And this is all in your personal leadership.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what happens, and you can't fault an employer. I had a career, 27 years. As you mentioned before, I work with Ericsson. It's a great company. But they can only hang with you so much. So I not only had one DUI, and they hung in there with me. They were great and worked that through with me. But once I had another one, they're not sure. You got to be reliable.
Yeah.
And when you're suffering from, you're not living in integrity, you're not reliable, and it kills relationships, whether that's personal relationships or professional relationships. And when you're in whatever addiction it is, you become so much more self-absorbed. And when you start to break out, you start to see outside of yourself. And I really have come alive. I'm not the man I used to be, but I'm not the man I will be, because I'm continuing to grow and develop. But to answer your question, a company can only hang with you for so long, your kids can only hang with you for so long. I mean, if they're knocking on the door of your heart and you're not answering because you're so selfish, basically into yourself, or a spouse, so I lost my marriage, I lost my career, and I lost the affection of my kids. And thank God, by the grace of God, some of those things you can get back. But I would just, anybody listening to this, that you can call me. I mean, that's what I do with my company now. It's called Unleashed to Lead. And the premise of the company is you've got to lead yourself well before you can lead anyone else well.
Yeah. And it's something I mentioned to you before the program, that your addiction is similar to my grandfather's addiction. So he was in the 50s and 60s. He, as I mentioned to you, he raised his family, middle class. That was unheard of. Well, not unheard of. It was not as, as prevalent in the 50s and 60s for a Black family. Went to work every day in a suit. But one summer, some of his family came to the house and they started drinking, and it changed everything. So he lost his family in the early 70s. And when my grandmother passed away in 1995, that's the first time he had seen her since she left. They never divorced, but that was the first time. So his personal leadership it wasn't there. It wasn't there to support, to lead a family at all. And he was trying to hide the pain. You mentioned it being a painkiller. He was trying to hide the pain of what he went through as a child. But in essence, he lost everything. He lost his marriage, his children. I mean, to the point that when he passed away, my uncle wanted nothing to do with him.
Yep.
So there are consequences. And he lost his job. They were like, it's like you said something, they can ride with you for a little while. And they did. They were with him for a while. But when it continued to happen,
that's right,
they had to let him go.
That's right. Yeah, it's exhausting, and you've got to own that. I've got to own the consequences. You can sit there and say, oh, well, especially in the church, you can just say, oh, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be gracious? Forgive me. You can't demand grace and mercy, to people you've hurt.
Yes.
And and what you're describing is a story that I've heard, that storyline, and it's powerful. That you're going to lose. You're going to lose. Eventually, if you don't lose your life, you're going to lose the things that are worth living for. And that's what I hear you describing, Carla, in the family. Yeah.
So I'm going to shift to the organization. I would like to talk about another time, Gary, about the Erickson Senior Living, because that just from a point of view of talking about the older adults, because they have so much to give. Just because you're at a senior living facility, that does not mean you're completely out. But that's another conversation, Gary. You got to come back.
That's right.
Another conversation.
I'd love to.
Yeah, because I would like to solely talk about that.
Sure.
And sometimes society looks down on older adults, or if they're in a particular area of their lives and it's false. They have a lot to get. Okay, I could talk
Oh
about
my
that.
goodness. It is
Yeah.
one of the richest things.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to have to, I would love to do that, Carla, because,
Yeah, because that
you know,
that's
and
something
I just,
is
my
impact.
best friends, you know, today, you know, they're in their 90s. I got a couple that are in their hundreds. I mean, you
Yes.
know, aging. Yes, we're definitely going to have to talk
Yes.
more. It is a rich environment.
Yes.
And we do not
It's
do well by our older adults in this society.
Yeah, and just by sitting at their feet and learning from them. Okay, Gary, I see I took you down the wrong road. Okay, let me ask you my question.
That's funny. Yes.
we have to talk about that another time. Okay. What's one decision you had to make that didn't feel good in the moment, but you knew it was the right one for the team or the organization?
Right. Well, you know, it's funny, a team, an organization. I think each one of us has a team around us, or there may be a team that you're privileged to lead. And, you know, I think of people in my mind's eye that just were not good in their role. It wasn't good for them. I mean, you know, if you ever enjoy firing people, get out of the people business. It's one of the hardest things that you have to do. But you're not doing a person any favors by not having them be in a position that they're not suited for, you know, and people have to take responsibility. I think one of the hardest things that you have to do as a leader of a team is really help people along and really get to the point where they're developing and they own that. And if they don't, you're not doing the rest of the team members any favor. So really, I think, you know, firing people. And I would also say, Carla, that in our personal lives, you know, I think it was Jim Rohn, you know, who was the mentor to people like Tony Robbins and all that, but kind of the guru in a lot of the leadership development space. You know, he said something to the effect that you become like the 5 people you hang around the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to think in your personal life, who am I hanging with? And sometimes it's people that, you know, have been friends for a long time, but you know, you may have to fire somebody from your tribe, so to speak.
Yeah.
You really do, because time is something you don't get back. And I don't mean to sound crass, but at the end of the day, you have to be intentional about who it is you surround yourself. Who is your community? You know, and are they people that are going to speak life into you? You know, one of the things, and you and I have, you know, worked with Andy Enriquez, and I know one thing he brought to the fore very clearly, you know, is if you're a 75 and you want to become a 100 and you want to chase 100, don't hang around a bunch of just 75s. Hang around people that are going to challenge you. Now, what we tend to do, because we want to feel good about ourselves and we don't want to challenge ourselves, I'm saying just generally, but you got to be intentional with this. We can have 50s all around us and we're feeling good at a 75 because we shine. When we're hanging around 70 or 50s. And I'm not saying don't love them, don't care for them, but you need to be intentional. And this is one of the hardest things to do, whether it's people on your team or I'm talking about in the workplace, a team that you're leading or a team that you surround yourself with. You have to be very, very intentional about what that looks like. And that's hard. That is hard to strike that balance.
It is. One of the things I learned is that if you're dealing with a particular team, it begins with the hiring process. So it's just not bringing someone in so they can perform the job, but it's bringing someone in who can perform the job and who can work with the team.
That's right.
Understand the mission. And then they can also work independently, because it takes a while to hire someone that's, and you're not going to find a perfect human being, but someone who would be perfect for the team. And you can't hire the same person.
That's right.
You can't have the same personalities. You need to have someone with a quirky attitude that may say, you know what you said was pretty dumb. And then everybody says, oh, you can't say that. Well, why can't they say that? They're not saying it to demean you. They're just saying, I don't agree. What about this? And
we need each other. We need each other. You know, if the whole world was just like me, If the whole world was just like
Oh,
me, what a not a good thing. One of the things
I
that
agree.
picked up with Maxwell is this DISC training. So
Mhm.
I'm certified trainer and consultant regarding DISC, and it's basically understanding why you behave the way you do, because
Yeah.
God has wired each one of us differently to
Yes.
complement one another. We
Mhm.
need each other. I'm not a high D, but I need the D around me to drive.
Yes.
When I'm sitting there saying, we all need to get along. Well, we do need to get along, but sometimes that can be overstated. I need somebody to say, "Oh, we need to make a decision by Friday. We
Yeah.
need to get this done." So how do you build a team? And that's what I hear you saying. And
Mhm.
so that's part of what I do with Unleash to Lead is DISC training, working with teams, and it is when it's done well. There's so much laughter in the group. Because I'm sitting there going, no wonder I drive Carla crazy. and no wonder I have to, with Carla, I have to lean in a little bit more, whatever it may be, because you understand not only your own personality style,
Yeah.
but how it interacts with
Yeah.
other people on the team. And a team that is humming and appreciating each
Yeah.
other's differences.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That you get to a whole new level of
I
synergy.
did that. I was in the senior training. Oh, it was at the Naval Postgraduate School about 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And they took us through Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
Or Myers-Briggs. Is it Myers-Briggs or Myers-Briggs? What have you? Anyway,
Myers-Briggs. Yeah.
okay, thank you. So as we're going along and they have everyone around, they told us to stand in a huge circle. And it was about 100 of us. And they said, I don't know if it's your code, whatever it is, stand where you are in your
Yes.
Myers-Briggs. Okay, so I stood there, and a lady who had who was opposite of me, she stood on the other side of the room, and I said, "That's the reason why my employee and I are like this."
That's
And
right.
I told her, and she laughed. She was a professor, I think, at the Naval Academy.
Yep.
We laughed so hard because I said, "I get it. I get it." She said, "Yeah, Carla." And something, she started joking with me. I said, "Oh my gosh." Until I saw the
Yes.
visual.
Isn't that
And
neat?
I was able to understand her personality a little bit more. And I
That's
had
right.
to come down and say, you know what? This is where I need to meet her.
That's right.
I had to change in order to meet her. And then things worked out well. She never
That's right.
knew that I went
Yeah.
through that experience.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
knew.
And when you learn about yourself, I mean, sometimes you say, you know what? This is not the kind of job that I should be in. Some people come to that realization. Patrick Lencioni has done a lot of work in this area.
Oh, I love this book.
Especially, Lencioni, he's phenomenal, and you realize, he was talking about one company, I think he went into, and a lawyer became the artistic creative director when he realized that this is not, I don't like being a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
This is not where my giftedness is. I went to law school and became a lawyer for the wrong reasons. Got into his giftedness and his strength-based leadership, and thrived. So I mean, the differences, the diversity in terms of our gifts, talents, all of that makes for a beautiful thing when we realize, I love what you said. It was like, oh my goodness, this can be a good thing, and we can celebrate it. But this is again where intentionality comes in with who's on your team. And life is meant to be lived with intention. I know that sounds, well, duh, but we don't often do that. We just kind of let life and the currents of life and environment, take us along as they will without being intentional about living. In fact, John Maxwell, he's written close to 100 books. He wrote a book about intentional living. So a lot of what you hear in me right now is echoed from my work with him, but we need to live intentionally.
Agree. Well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks in Orlando.
Yes, that's right.
Lead to live.
Live to lead. Live to lead is.
I had it backwards. Live to lead. Thank you.
Live to lead. That's right.
Live to lead. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Well, thank you, Gary. We're at the end of this time.
Oh,
and my
so
ongoing joke is only really ask you two of my questions.
Yes.
I had several more. This was a great conversation, and I will be glad to have you back so we can talk about our senior force who has so much.
Yeah.
I don't know. They just have so much knowledge and just an enormous amount of experience that we can all learn from.
That's
And
right.
we should not look down.
No, thank you. And this has been a great opportunity. I love chatting with you and talking with you. It's
Awesome.
just something that
Fabulous.
and learning from each other. It's great.
Yeah.
But yep. So yeah, if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm at unleashedtolead.com. You can check me out there, and that'd be great as I look forward to meeting more people.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. And then also I'm giving away, if you DM me in Facebook or Instagram, or as we are on LinkedIn, my book. It is called Let's Get Down to Business. It's for new leaders. So again, DM me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and I'll take the first 5 DMs. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gary. I'll see you next year, and we'll have our next conversation. Thank you.
That'll be great.
A pleasure.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good day.
You too.